Welcome, and thank you for joining us for the Florida Restaurant and Lodging Show, live at your table, virtual event. Before we get started with our discussion on how to position your SMB for growth, we'd like to share a few housekeeping items. All audience members are on listen-only mode, which means you're muted. We will be monitoring audience engagement on the dashboard and do encourage you to participate by using the question pane. There'll be time for questions at the end of the presentation. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and will be available on our website, flrestaurantandlodgingshow.com, by the end of the week. Now, without further delay, let me introduce Toby Malbec, Principal, ConStrata Technology Consulting. He will be leading a panel discussion. So thank you, Toby, for being with us today.
Amy, thank you. Appreciate that. And good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, depending on where in the country or the world that you might be. My name is Toby Malbec, and I'm the Managing Director of ConStrata Technology based in the greater Washington, D.C. area. So thanks for joining us. Before we start, I'd like to thank Square, who's our sponsor for today's panel on how to position your small to medium-sized business for growth. Restaurant technology from restaurant POS, contact payments tools, KDS online ordering, order management, and consolidating services. Square has solutions for all of those. So if you're in the market for any of that type of business or product offerings, look up Square at square.com/restaurants. Additionally, I'd like to thank both Clarion, who is the sponsor of today's event, as well as the IFBTA, the International Food and Beverage Technology Association, is a nonprofit trade association, and its primary goal is to work on networking and education for the global food and beverage technology community. Its members are all in the food and beverage industry, and it includes anybody from an operator to suppliers, educators, as well as even associations. So anybody who has interest in understanding a little bit more about the technology industry as it relates to the food industry. And finally, the IFBTA, for those people who are coming into the market, offers a comprehensive professional certification program as well. 101 level course for those wanting to understand the technology a little bit better, which is good these days as we have more and more people getting into the food and beverage industry. So a little bit there about our sponsors today. So again, thank you for joining. Today's session is really about where organizations are going as we begin to emerge out of COVID. We'll talk a little bit about the impact that the pandemic has had on these two restaurant operators as it relates to the IT world. A little bit about strategy, some about the tactics that the organizations have had to do as it relates to getting through this very challenging time for the restaurant industry. Clearly no playbook for what we've just been through over the last 6 or 7 months, as these gentlemen will attest to. So we'll talk a little bit about that as it relates to these two particular organizations. First of all, let me start off by introducing our panel. To the immediate left, the furthest left, that way, is Ernest Mandowsky. Ernest's background is in operations before he entered the IT world. He has held positions with the Palm Restaurant Group, where he worked very much on changing their technology landscape and modernizing their technology platform before recently joining Landry's. And in Landry's, his capacity is more on the data side. So Ernesto has been very involved with data mapping, data issues, and many of you know, really the crux of our industry is not only collecting data, but being able to analyze data and use it to the best use possible. So Ernesto brings that background to us. Josh comes from the IT side, and Josh is the current director of IT at Sonny's Barbecue.
Sorry, that's IT manager.
I'm sorry, IT manager. I gave you a promotion, Josh. Go with it. And in his capacity, Josh is involved with a lot of the day-to-day operations, deploying of technology solutions, as well as assisting the organization in its functional IT role. So in that capacity, he really is the guy who keeps the trains running on time. So Josh will provide us a perspective of really the day-to-day challenges of not only working through as we exist today, but going forward, how that organization is going to look. So welcome, Ernesto. Welcome, Josh. We appreciate your time today.
Thank you for having us.
Great. So let's start, although I do want to focus more on post-COVID. I think a lot of folks have really kind of beaten the horse of where COVID has challenged us. I do want to talk a little bit about how, as organizations that are not QSR, I mean, obviously Landry's has a lot of table service. Sonny's by nature is more of a table service, but does have some carry-out elements. What changes have you guys had to make in your restaurant operations to be able to maybe not thrive, but survive during the last couple of months of challenge. And Josh, let's start with you. What are some of the changes you guys have had to implement?
So first of all, thanks for having us again. I'll speak to the infrastructure side of sort of, what that looks like. So in regards to dealing with COVID changes and different things like that, you talk about spinning up, integration services and, having to make adjustments for things that might require tablets outside at curbside and different things of that nature, right? So in some cases, you have to get creative and do testing of different things, like, for instance, with wireless and tablet devices. Some, may not be able to do an outside access point due to, costs associated with that, in addition to what they're already paying for COVID. So in some cases, you can get creative with things like traffic shaping and doing testing of different hotspot areas where you need coverage. Things like moving your access points closer to open windows where they may have been in a more centralized location to a dining room or a takeout area or something of that nature. From a network perspective, you're really talking about verifying all the different services that you're adding on due to changes, within COVID, integration services, looking at overall firewall requirements for that, verifying security, making sure that your brand and your customers are protected, and communicating that out to the brand, and maintaining communication with your customers too, I think is really key across the board, really.
Yeah. Ernesto, from the data side and the application side, changes that Landry's has had to make during this time.
I can't speak for Landry's wide, because I'm pretty much siloed in on the Palm, but operationally, the Palm has traditionally actually never had a delivery program ever. And so COVID very quickly forced us to launch a delivery program, figure everything out operationally, figure everything out on the tech side. Not to mention, we got acquired the day before COVID started. So between figuring out all the reporting, keeping everyone informed on the performance of all the new programs that were going on, really figuring out how to generate cash offsite, because very quickly, dine-in had stopped, and going from a restaurant that never offered delivery to begin with to almost going fully delivery just required so many different moving parts.
Wow. And to that end, let's follow up on that. How much of that thought leadership then to make that fairly significant pivot came from your vendors being able to say, hey, look, Ernesto or the Palm, we've got a solution for you that you can deploy. Did the thought leadership come from within, or did you see that the vendors kind of stepped up and were able to help you?
I think the thought leadership, came from within, but really came from the Landry side. The second we got acquired, we almost kind of were sprinting at 1,000,000 miles an hour, just catching up, integrating systems, moving on to Landry's internal processes, HR, just everything. And so when their IT division came, their army of IT soldiers, they kind of put us on the tracks necessary to get a delivery program rolled out, to get all the other programs rolled out, to stop the bleeding as much as possible.
Yeah. So Josh, you clearly don't have an army over there. Last I checked, you're an IT staff of less than a half dozen, maybe even less than that. So how did you guys, now clearly you had some delivery in place already. Did you have to bolster that? Did you have the pieces in place? Did you have to kind of rethink pieces?
So, I can speak a little bit to the generalization. So, Sonny's is on a cloud-based point of sale system. So there's a lot of open API integrations that we can look at as a result of that, right? So, again, to my side, there's a lot of concerns there. Not really concerns, but when you're looking at integrating something into your point of sale network, right? I can say, on the vendor side, it's been absolutely amazing within our brand and on the vendor side, seeing everyone just come together to make everything happen. To Ernesto's point, it's almost a constant shift every day in terms of needs or requirements or whatever you need to do. And it's just great that the brand and vendors are all in unison, and that's been really great to see.
Yeah. So one of the things that you kind of alluded to, Josh, in your opening comments there about having to spin up a lot of services, and let's face it, I'm sitting in my house. Josh, you're probably doing the same thing. Ernesto, my guess is you're probably as well. So we moved from a centralized workforce to a decentralized workforce very quickly, just by necessity. How has that changed, Josh, probably more specifically, your world and things that you've had to do to accommodate that to make your workforce productive?
You know, fortunately, I can say with planning on the infrastructure side, that's pretty the critical element that has allowed us to sort of adapt to all of these different changes. You know, we made a transition a while ago to Microsoft Office 365 hosted services, right? And depending on the type of services that you sign up for, there's different benefits that you gain from that. You know, Power App or Power BI, for instance, are add-ons. You know, when you talk about Microsoft Teams, that's absolutely been invaluable. So we're doing a lot of research and development and testing with that within our infrastructure to see what works for us and what doesn't work, while still maintaining a focus on security and just, you know, protecting the brand and our customers and everyone, our vendors too, for that instance.
Yeah. Any new tools that you guys are looking at as a result of this? I hate to be an old kind of baby boomer here, but you know, there's always that question about productivity. Does productivity drop when people work remotely? How do you monitor it? Have you looked at any tools to say, you know, hey, Ernesto was online for 12 hours yesterday. Toby was on for an hour and a half. I mean, you know, any of those types of tools?
So it's actually, you know, funny. We do. It's kind of, you know, a running joke because they know we you know, we see, but you know, that's not really the reason it's there, right? We do have remote tools in place that happen to have features that you can monitor things like processors and memory and disk usage, patch management, and when you talk about security, endpoint software that can look at malware attempts or you know, potentially malicious websites, right? Application blocking. So you know, it's not really about monitoring them because, you know, we have a great culture and there's trust there, and you know, so far it's worked great for us. Quite honestly, it's been amazing, and our team is amazing, and I haven't seen any issues so far. There's been a few challenges, you know, with licensing as it relates to like VPN, because you increase, of course, you decrease Office use, and you have more folks going remote and needing VPN, you know, to get to certain endpoints, and so, you know, that's been somewhat of a challenge, but we've gotten through that. And then leveraging tools like OneDrive, you know, whereas typically a company may have used, you know, a on-prem file server, right? And so OneDrive and the sharing features is pretty nice during this time as well.
Excellent. Skip, welcome. Nice to see you join us. We'll jump over and we're going to tip a ball over to you in a second and we'll do a quick intro. But quickly, Ernesto, working remote, from a professional standpoint, how's the organization taken to it, and benefits, disadvantages? How have you guys seen it work at the Palm?
Our Palm team is still remote. The Landry's team, the analysis team, has, you know, people have been able to actually go into the office with caution. However, you know, the Palm team, even though we're all still remote, we all are still using tools such as Slack and other, you know, instant messaging platforms to make sure that we're all constantly communicating. Prior to COVID, when I was brought on 2 years ago, there weren't any of these communication tools or project management tools such as Trello, which kind of give the whole team a bird's eye view of all the different projects going on. Can't imagine it was much. I mean, of course, it was different. The market was different 2 years ago as it was now in COVID. But you know, when I was originally brought on and we were tasked with implementing all these new programs, we use certain tools like Trello and Slack to make sure that everyone's in communication. Because with the team that's traveling across the country, if you're not using some of these tools, it's very easy for action items to fall through the cracks.
Yeah, agreed. So we're happy to have Skip Kimpel join us. Skip is the ex, and I may get your titles wrong, Skip, so just bear with me. The ex-CIO or the director of IT at Anthony's Coal Fire, and he is currently the CIO at Four Rivers Restaurant Group based in Orlando. As well, Skip also publishes a blog called the Tech Chef, the Restaurant Technology Podcast, which you can find on LinkedIn. So Skip, thanks for joining us. We appreciate you joining.
Thank you for having me. I apologize for being late, some communication issues, but I'm glad to be on board here.
We'll get Josh to help you out next time. So
Right next door to me, so, yeah.
Anyway, let's start, Skip, with a question around kind of this. And as I said, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about post-COVID and where we're going. But let's do a lessons learned real quick here. And, what lessons did Four Rivers in your organization really learn over the last couple months from dealing with this pandemic, and how you've had to kind of pivot and make changes to your organization? What are some of the key takeaways?
Well, obviously enhancing your off-premise strategy, making sure your third-party delivery integration is solidified, and all your integrations are solidified. Your online ordering platform is solid, and if it's not, make sure you make enhancements to that. But I think from a more operational perspective, it came down to don't be afraid to be scrappy. Don't be afraid to allow your managers to make some decisions in regards to menu options that you would have pulled your hair out in the past. But it was survival mode for so long that I believe the companies that truly embraced the ability to kind of expand from your brand and be able to pivot and do what you need to do to survive, I think those are the companies that are doing quite well at this point in time. Mm-hmm. And I think the companies that continue to invest in technology, especially now, are the companies that are not only going to survive but thrive through this strange atmosphere that we've never experienced before. This is the time to really enhance your technology capabilities, because I truly believe that technology is driving the revenue initiatives within a restaurant right now.
Yeah. We have a couple of our clients who have said to us, if it wasn't for technology, they would no longer be on the landscape. So it's interesting how for years technology was considered a necessary evil, and now people are like, thank God we actually spent the time to do it. So Ernesto, some of the terms Skip used there, scrappy, nimble, do those speak to you guys, or have you found a different way to kind of survive through these challenging days?
We've all been scrappy. The Palm team has been scrappy for the past 2 years. Slight background, a whole new team was brought in at the management level, at the corporate level, to help, implement new technologies. And in our second month on the job, we were, slammed with a huge lawsuit that our sales immediately started to decline. We didn't have many updated systems. We didn't have email marketing. We didn't have a modernized loyalty platform, and we kind of had to get very creative to battle this decrease in sales. So yeah, Skip said, giving your managers the freedom to kind of drum up solutions that in the past maybe you wouldn't have considered, but they're the boots on the ground, and they know what sells. And so, we invented wine dinners all throughout 2019, which kind of laid the foundation for what we've been doing now during COVID. A really big driver, something we started now by partnering with some of our liquor brands and creating Zoom dinners, these experiential dinners to keep our customer base engaged throughout this time. So maybe they can't come in and eat at the restaurant, but they can carry out either fully cooked or part cooked meal, and then log in and have a bourbon tasting event where they're learning about our liquors, and they're having kind of the Palm experience at home. I truly think the at-home experience is it must be part of your business strategy. And then, of course, having all the technology in order to support that.
Yeah, Ernest, you had me at bourbon. So Josh, more on the infrastructure side. What nimble, scrappy, probably speaks to a lot of what you've had to do as well in terms of making sure that you can support the operations.
Yeah, it's definitely on your toes. I mean, when your operators are relying on you, and it's all hands on deck. I mean, whether you're working all the time or not, I mean, it's super important that they get the assistance that they need. And that includes, providing. We've, with COVID coming out, I think it's exposed, not fully, but any sort of not loopholes or missing pieces to the puzzle, if you will, for how you plan things or communicate and different things of that nature. It definitely makes you rethink, and like I said, being able to adapt quickly, and definitely nimble. And when you start talking about rolling out digital seating systems on the fly, and trying to provide a very viable wireless solution to your brand and your franchisees that's cost effective, and when they're already hurting, from all the just challenges. I think that's very important, to be flexible in that regard.
Yeah. Just for all the participants, if you have questions, feel free to send them along, and Amy will get them over to us, and we'll make sure that we incorporate them into the presentation. We want to make sure we keep this as relevant to you as the audience as possible. But in absence of that, we're going to keep going down the path. We're going to talk a little bit now about as we emerge from what has been a very challenging and unique and business climate for the restaurant industry. And so one of the questions I wanted to ask is, are there some lessons learned around strategic initiatives that you discovered, fell upon, were forced to dictate, that occurred during this period of time that you now look at and say, this may be throwaway, or hey, this may be part of our future and we just never even thought about it until now? Skip, you want to start with it?
I do. So I think we all learned that we can accomplish things much quicker than we originally anticipated. I think something that would have taken 6 to 8 months, we figured out how to do it in 2 to 3 weeks.
What do they say? Necessity is the mother of invention, is it?
It is. I think one of the issues we discovered that we needed at the time, but it's become less relevant over, during this process that we've gone through, but it should not be forgotten because I think it could come back to be beneficial to us, is the whole curbside and pop-up delivery method. We initiated some technology where we could do curbside payments, curbside ordering. While that's kind of dissipated, and I think this conversation is very different and relevant depending upon what region, what state, what city you're in. But for us in Orlando, it's kind of dissipated a little bit, where we initiated the technology. We may not need it right now, but we may need it in the future. And I think whatever IT initiatives or processes that you've created to go through this experience we've just gone through, don't forget those processes. Remember, they still exist because you might have to rely upon them in the future. And I think we all realize the future might happen upon us much quicker than we anticipate. So I think having those initiatives in your back pocket ready to go again is extremely important.
Josh, you've obviously had to spin up a lot of things. How much of that sticks around? How much of it goes to Skip's case back in the closet? How do you see things, evolving here?
Sure. So, I mean, going back to talking about, infrastructure and sort of what we were discussing before as it relates to Office 365 and working remotely and sort of the, typical hardware office relationship with the end user, right? We're exploring, that's actually been working great for us, working remotely, like I said. And so we're currently exploring, bring your own device type scenarios at work that then, we, for those that don't know, Sonny's is a franchise company. So, a big part of what I do is supporting all of the HQ end users so that they can then support the franchise community and our customers and so on, and vendors. And so, we're just trying to look at that from a fresh perspective. Currently there's a few, like I said, there's a few challenges here and there working remotely, but when you see it working well, you start to get a little creative and start get these little ideas of how far can we take this really. So you start looking at things like maybe rather than your typical life cycle hardware management, a portion of that goes to the end user, they get their own device, and then you still maintain security via some sort of advanced endpoint that can do the full, all the way to app layer, you name it. You can control the data, what goes on there, peripherals, while still not compromising their personal use, because at the end of the day, at that point, it would be their home computer as well. So we're currently testing that and looking at different ideas, but and then if you're talking about that, well, what do you do with your office space, right? Now you're saving on your office space, and where do you go from there? Your server room goes to a co-location, and
Yeah, world changes quite a bit, right?
right.
So, Ernesto, thoughts?
I think with the switch kind of focusing in on the analysis side, I've kind of moved away on what technology is here to stay. But I definitely think what is here to stay is thinking more of these off-premise events from customer experience, customer engagement, such as the Zoom dinner, catering, delivery, and whatnot. From an IT perspective, not in that part of the organization anymore, unfortunately.
Understood. Let's talk a little bit about an area that is near and dear to your heart, Ernesto. Let's talk about data. One of the things that we talk to a lot of our clients about is that as organizations, reboot from what has been a very difficult time, the best place to start is with your most loyal customers and reach back out to them and say, hey, look, the talk of our demise has been greatly, exaggerated. We're here to stay. And some organizations are using their loyalty programs or other forms of data to do that. Without sharing the secret sauce, can you talk a little bit about how the Palm and your organization is trying to use data to either continue to keep in touch with its clients or its customers, or maybe even, enhance that experience?
Yeah, I mean, there's the word greenfield, something that really hasn't been done before in the past year and a half, pre-acquisition, implementing things as basic as just email automation, messaging your most loyal guests that tie into the activity of the POS. It's just kind of some basic ways to keep the conversation with your most loyal guests. We've been in the news quite a bit for the past 2 years, so leveraging our emails just to keep open lines of communication with them has been most valuable. Traditionally, we've had about 30% of our sales have come from our loyalty program, and so just using basic email outreach has been helpful for us. Once you can get into some business rules around how you can automate different use cases for that loyalty, for lapsed guests that haven't been to the restaurant after 3 months or 5 months or 6 months, sending them different offers, that's definitely a great way to bring guests in. There are new, we don't use some of the more sophisticated loyalty programs that are out there, but I do know that there are loyalty programs that kind of integrate and can have business rules that trigger off of the item level. So whenever specific items on your menu are ordered, emails can be sent to invite the guest back in with a different offer. And so, once you're able to set up some of those systems, really helps you, drive the frequency.
Yeah. Ernesto, while we've got you talking about that, one of the questions that came in from the field was obviously the Palm changing its business model so dramatically to support delivery. Do you see that sticking around, or was that really kind of a necessary evil during this difficult time? Do you envision keeping delivery after the pandemic?
I think delivery is here to stay. Pre-pandemic, just consumer behavior, where I think we're moving more to an at-home world, Netflix at home, work at home, educate at home, study at home. Like the next year and a half, I think is going to be very critical. Past that, I don't know. I can't see that far, but I think delivery will always be here to stay.
Yeah. Yeah, I would happen to agree with you. I hope this pendulum swings back a little bit, because I'd hate to see the restaurant experience is still very much a hands-on experience. My wife and I were just talking about that the other day. An experience at the Palm is different than an experience picking up a bag at the Palm and taking it home. So I hope that never goes away. Although the option to do either should be very good. So Josh, one of the interesting questions that came in from the field, and it kind of speaks to, in many cases, infrastructure. And the person that wrote in said that there are reports that a large number of restaurants, some have said upwards of 20, 30,000 restaurants that close, will never reopen again. And the question was, do we think that that's because they just didn't have the right technology in place and the technology platform to be able to pivot? I mean, if you don't have the structure in place to be able to support these things, do you think that's a major reason why many of these restaurants failed?
I think that depends on a lot of factors. If you're talking about I think I've seen, for instance, there's a Chinese restaurant that's, not a chain in any way, shape, or form, that's by my house, and they really got creative. I mean, they blocked off their door to the building, and they just went 100% takeout, and they're doing perfectly fine. I think my point there is, if you're motivated and resilient, and you care about your people and your business, hope you'll find a way in some way, shape, or form, unless all the forces are just absolutely against you. You know what I mean? And one of the one of the things I've observed that's really interesting is you see a lot of vendors and just businesses in general breaking barriers to help each other. And it doesn't really matter what's going on. It's a sharing of information and how to adjust and what do I do, and do you have a reliable resource? And so, I think it does have to do with factors like money and different things like that. But do I think that is the reason they went out of business? I think there's maybe some other things there as well. Not to discredit that, of course.
Yeah,
and sorry for their loss.
No, yeah, absolutely. It's and one of the questions we'll ask a little bit is, while there's been some great loss here, there's also great opportunity for other organizations. We'll talk about that a little bit in a minute. Skip, same question, in terms of the role that technology and really even all the pieces around it, social media and all of that, have had to do with the demise of some restaurants. Are there certain technologies that were more coveted during this period of time, and that if you just weren't in a position to embrace them, may have led to their decline?
So I do believe there is. I think a lot of it has, the mom and pop organizations that potentially did not know the capabilities of what they had available to them, and also, the cost involved. I think there is a lot of thought process in regards to, it's too expensive, it's too complicated for us to do. That's not the case. It just takes a little bit of research. I have been a huge advocate, and perfect example today. I went out to lunch at a local restaurant that I was so glad to see still existed, but he had talked about, I talked to the owner where he had shut down for 7 weeks because he didn't know how to handle off-premise and third-party delivery. And I'm a huge advocate. I don't care if I work for Four Rivers. I am here to help everybody, not only in the restaurant industry. Anything I can do to share knowledge, I am here to help them. So I told him, I offered up to him, come to me if you have a question about third-party delivery or integration, or just the processes around that. Please come to me. I'm willing to share. And I think that's an important piece. Is we're in a unique time where if nobody's got a secret sauce, but if you've got a secret sauce, if you've got something to share, just share it with whoever you can, because we're all in it together and we all need to survive through this time period.
Absolutely, well said. So one of the things, as I was saying before, and again, reminder, if anybody has any questions, those are great. We're going to touch on another one here in a minute. One of the things is, while there's been a lot of very sad stories in terms of restaurants closing, there are other organizations that have seen tremendous opportunity that may come out of this. And with tremendous opportunity comes growth, comes hiring, comes employment opportunities. One of those areas where we're seeing growth is in the area of ghost kitchens. Can you guys speak a little bit in your organizations? Josh, maybe you can talk about it from a technical standpoint, some of the challenges, but Skip, Ernesto, is a ghost kitchen something that your organizations would look at in terms of a way to expand its reach without creating a restaurant environment?
I'll go ahead and start the conversation. Ernesto, sorry to jump in there. Ghost kitchens, virtual kitchens, those are all something that I think every restaurant out there that has their eye on the radar, they're looking at, because I think they're huge opportunities for the restaurants right now. There's lots of talk about where ghost kitchens are the savior of restaurants of the future. I saw a very interesting scenario in Nashville as I was traveling this week, where they had kind of like a reef kitchen where they had a trailer set outside, but every single day they had a different restaurant in that ghost kitchen. I mean, it was a brilliant concept, but there's been lots of success stories in regards to virtual kitchens. There's a huge distinction between the two, but I think those are definitely part of our future, and I don't think there's a going away. I think they're here to stay, at least for the next couple of years.
Yeah, there's actually been some interesting stuff going on as shopping malls have begun to kind of pull back, where one of the things that major shopping malls have are large parking areas. And many of those larger parking areas provide a very cheap infrastructure for ghost kitchens. So we're seeing some very creative usage of space as it relates to creating those types of things. Now, Ernesto, I don't know, again, if delivery may be part of the future for the Palm, but do you guys ever foresee something like a ghost kitchens being kind of part of the landscape? Oh, can't hear you, Ernesto. Sorry. You on mute by any chance? Okay. Well, we can't hear you, I'm afraid.
All right. So,
yeah.
I do not believe ghost kitchens are currently being rolled out with the Palm. Maybe other concepts of Landry's, but I haven't heard yet. But I do personally, I do believe ghost kitchens are definitely in our future.
Mm-hmm. From an infrastructure standpoint, Josh, what challenges would that put on you're tearing your hair out over there. What kind of challenges would that create from an infrastructure and technology standpoint for Sonny's?
Well, I can tell you we're definitely looking, we're playing with the idea of virtual reality and exploring that from multiple perspectives, right? If you talk about virtual reality in general, you were talking about shopping malls where some of these businesses are going out of business, but it's very easy to spin up a virtual store, and maybe you can integrate buttons in there to buy from that store, right? And you look at Facebook rolling out Oculus Quest. I mean, it's going to hit, it's basically almost mainstream right now. I mean, so if you talk about, from an infrastructure perspective, I see the value of using a virtual kitchen when you start talking about an open API system being able to connect directly to a virtual screen, and you're saving money. For instance, instead of purchasing a monitor and potentially a computer to go along with that as a KDS, right? That cost would shift obviously to headsets or some sort of mixed reality, type setup. But you look at smart glasses now, so that's rapidly becoming cost effective as well. So, I see that going a lot of different ways. You could use that as a franchise sales model and use that, for folks to look at your building, your culture, your technology remotely from anywhere in the world. So there's all kinds of applications for that.
Yeah. It's been an interesting year in that for every year, it seems like as technology professionals, we get to this point in the year where we start to talk about budgets, and it's okay, we're going to cut your budget 10%, we're going to cut your budget 5%. I don't hear that conversation, and I don't know if you guys are either, but I think the first time, maybe in as long as I've been in the industry, there's a prevailing theme that is, thank God we embrace technology, otherwise we might have been one of those casualties during this period of time. So I see IT actually budgets increasing for many of our clients, and we're seeing that more and more strategic initiatives underway around technology. As it relates to that, can you guys talk a little bit as we head into 2021 and 2022 about any major strategic technology initiatives that you can speak to, whether those include expansion of your brand or just maybe retrenching, but what other technology initiatives, now that you've kind of gotten past this stuff, do you see embracing in the next couple of years? And Why don't we start with you, Josh, on an infrastructure standpoint? Are there things that you guys are now looking to do that maybe are more strategic moving forward?
We're currently reviewing that now, but from a, for an overall brand perspective, as it relates to infrastructure, I think right now, Skip touched on this earlier. It's really important to just make sure that as we continue to add on integrations and more hardware and different tablets, that you have the proper tools, remote tools that can give you visibility into those endpoints. They can give you, to Ernesto's world, they can give you the data. And then if you have a great data team, which we definitely do, they can look at that data and come up with some really great insights that, related to behavior or security or you name it, that you might not see out of a native report from a system. So I think that understanding what you're building and being able to report and analyze that to make sure that it's functioning as intended is pretty important.
Yeah.
And that's what we'll be focusing on to make sure that's rock solid.
Going into 2021, 2022, Ernesto, data especially, we've already talked about just the data analytics, your area of specialty. Are there things that the Palm and Landry's is looking at leveraging?
To be quite honest, I'm still learning how Landry specifically looks at everything.
How about the Palm specifically then?
I'm playing catch up with Palm. We're following what Landry's is giving us. So I'm still kind of on the learning side of how they look at things.
Yeah, the joy of being with a big company, if you follow the herd. Yep. How about Four Rivers? What strategic initiatives in 2021, 22?
Well, I think data is everything. It's been my mantra since I walked into this organization. It allows you to be more fluid and make decisions quicker, which I think in today's day is more critical than ever. But we discovered also a drive-through initiative is also extremely important to our survival. It's what people want. Even if it's for today, it's going to be for at least the next couple of years of what people want. So, converting our locations to drive-through scenarios, I think, is important to us as well. And always a concentration on the off-premise technology and the off-premise initiatives. And that covers a plethora of different ideals in regards to, how you look at off-premise. But, I've been a huge advocate in the last company as well as this company to bring on somebody on board that specifically handles that portion of the business, because I think it's so huge to the success of what we're doing that it cannot be ignored, and you need somebody to pay constant attention to that piece of the business.
Yeah. So we're just wrapping up here, and thank you, Ernesto, Josh, Skip, for your insight and time. We have one more question, and then we'll do a quick thank you. And the question is really around, and it may be one that I'll do as a jump ball because maybe not everybody on the call has a perspective, but a question came in about how you guys build your IT teams and whether or not things like restaurant experience is important, or whether IT experience is more important to that. And I have a perspective, which in this case I won't share. I don't want to tamper with the jury, but who wants to take that? Restaurant experience, IT experience, what's more important? Skip, you want to start?
I will. So I will have to say that from a restaurant experience perspective, prior to Anthony's, I had none. I jumped in head first into this community that we're in, and I realized quickly that this is a community that shares with each other. And I think that from a perspective of, is restaurant experience or IT experience more important? I truly believe IT experience is more important. There are some nuances to the restaurant industry that come with time, especially from a POS perspective, the attention to detail in regards to how we support a restaurant. But supportive perspective it's no different than a retail perspective. So I think your IT knowledge is much more important these days, but having that as a background certainly helps. But there's no reason why you should ignore somebody that does not have restaurant technology experience.
Got it. Well, Ernesto, you come from the restaurant industry, and Skip, or Josh, you don't. So do you guys have a perspective one way or the other, whether or not Either one of those would have helped you?
I dabbled in restaurants. I was a busboy for a few months, and I started asking questions about technology, and was asked to go back to clearing tables. And so, I jumped in. I think through technology. I think having an awareness of how restaurants work, understanding the system of restaurants, what data, like what information is coming into the systems, what information is coming out, how is it being modified. I think all of that is very important.
Josh, a perspective, would knowing restaurants have helped you, or was this just an on-the-job learning and
Well, I definitely, if we're being frank here, I lean heavily on our team. We are a small team, but we each have our individual strengths, and the restaurant side is not always my strong side, though I do understand it to a degree, right? Give me a network and API firewall troubleshooting, no issues, but talk about promo configurations, this, that, and the other, and operational, and it's like
yeah.
But I think for hiring in your team, I think it's important to not only assess skill sets and things of that nature, because a lot of some things like basic troubleshooting can be taught, but I think it's important to find a team that you have good synergy with, that that aligns with the brand, and in a lot of ways our team feels very strongly that the brand really aligns with our personal values, and I think that creates a very strong relationship with the company, and it just allows you to accomplish more with trust and just knowing that you have each other's backs, and that's really important.
Yes, famous last words. So look, I want to thank everybody for participating today. Ernesto from the Palm, Josh from Sonny's, Skip from Four Rivers. Your insight was very helpful. We appreciate you taking the time. Thanks again to Square for sponsoring, as well as the IFBTA for sponsoring. We hope this was of value to everybody, and we look forward to seeing you guys very soon in a restaurant in the greater Florida area. Thanks, everybody. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.